Yep.
This week's news from the tubes on F5 Live Refreshing Technology is proudly powered by Malwarebytes. Whether you use a PC, a Mac, or a mobile device, Malwarebytes Premium is the company's strongest protection ever. It fights threats that traditional antivirus software can't stop, plus it actively blocks threats like worms, rogues, dialers, trojans, spyware, and a whole lot more. It allows you to use your computer and mobile devices with confidence and peace of mind. To learn more and to get a special price, you can go to f5live.tv/malwarebytes. I've got an update on a story we first talked about a decade ago. Other than the Google and Oracle story, I don't know that we've ever been able to do this before. So I'm pretty excited about this because the organization is insane. If you've never heard of Prenda Law, count yourself lucky. The organization purports to be a law firm, though it's more akin to the mafia. What they did was they went out and they purchased the legal rights to, we'll call it adult-oriented content. And then they'd go on sites like the Pirate Bay and upload a torrent, or they'd go on to, at one point in history, they'd go on to something like LimeWire, and they'd make the content that they had just purchased available for download. Then they'd sit back and wait for people to start downloading it. They'd grab the IP addresses of the people that connected to their torrents. They'd reverse lookup and then file lawsuits against the people who downloaded it for copyright infringement. So, if they had just done that, they might have gotten away with it. But they made a couple of big mistakes. First, they would send a letter. And the letter would basically say, "You've been sued, but the copyright holder is willing to settle." Uh-oh. Turns out you can't do that. That's extortion. And they sent it in a letter, which gets the mail involved, which is mail fraud. Plus, they would ask people to wire them the money for the extortion payments. Wire fraud. So, we tracked this from the first charge, which was in 2013. It happened over a series of time. They were charged, I think, in 2014, in 2019, at least two of the three. The third one, Paul Duffy, is a name that seems to have just vanished into history. The only place I found his name today in regards to Prenda Law was in our articles. So I don't know what his fate was, but I do know that the two primaries, John Steele and Paul Hansmeyer, are both in prison. They both went to jail in 2019. They have had, well, Steele said, "I'm guilty, you're right, whoop, let's go." And he is in for 5 years on just the wire fraud and the mail fraud. Hansmeyer appeared to be the ringleader of this crazy extortion scheme, even though Steele was the founder of the organization. And he went away for 14 years because his included the extortion charges. Now, that's our history. Where are we today? Hansmeyer wants to get the scheme going again. From prison.
Oh, good.
He has asked a judge for an injunction against the federal government to prevent them from enforcing 3 laws: a wire fraud law, a mail fraud law, and an extortion law that prevents him essentially from practicing law of any kind and engaging in any of the activity that he's in jail for. In this case, copyright infringement lawsuits. He wants an injunction to prevent the federal government from enforcing those laws. Why? Because he wants to hire a private investigator to start filing copyright lawsuits again. From prison.
Well,
which he is in for fraud.
Yes. But it's what I have a question though. So if he did what he was doing, but he had hired a process server to serve people with the lawsuits, would that have been legal?
It's a very good question. We're not entirely sure. So in fairness, process servers were involved because the lawsuits were legally filed. It's not like they were sending letters that said, "We will sue you if you don't settle." That's above extortion. That's a particular level of legal malpractice. I can't remember the term, but like that's a whole other thing that you get disbarred for basically immediately. They were legally filing the suits, waiting for the things to be served, and then sending the letter. It seems like the letter is where everything went sideways for them. If they had, because it showed that they weren't actually serious about the suit was used as a threat so that they could get the settlements, which
how is this
also
different
is
than
not
the
legal.
recording industry?
What's that?
How is this different than the RIAA suing people for file sharing?
Yeah, so what RIA was doing was slightly different. They weren't actually posting the content. They weren't doing the entrapment aspect of it. They were tracking existing torrents, which was, or other P2P things. They weren't actually initiating, in this case, the torrent. They could download the content that was being illegally shared and then track it, but they weren't putting the content out there in the first place. That was the whole beginning problem. In 2013, the problem came down to that it was essentially a legal entrapment scheme to extort people, as opposed to tracking an existing copyright infringement thing. That there was a weird line. They got in trouble.
So if they just waited
for somebody else to do it,
right? If they just waited for somebody else to infringe, then everything they did, then what they did would have been okay.
They still couldn't have sent the letters.
Right. Okay.
They could have filed the suit. If they had just not sent the letters, probably nobody would be in prison today. It was, right. In the end, it was the letters that got them in trouble.
Right. Because I'm just saying, like, this sounds a lot like, I mean, it sounds like they were trying to make what happened with the RIA with RIA happen. Mm-hmm. They just didn't want to wait for someone to do it to them, which maybe given what they owned, maybe it wasn't going to happen as much or as easily or as frequently as, say, any song in the world. Right. So they had to, but yeah, like and a lot of,
and RIA didn't own the content; they represented the people who did. So they had a larger catalog to attack on, as opposed to these guys who were, I think they were buying the content from porn studios that were going out of business. I think that's what they were acquiring. I'm not Again, it's been a decade. The details are a little fuzzy in my head.
They
But if I
saw
remember
this as
correctly,
they
that's
saw
what they're
this as
doing.
a business model.
Yes.
They saw this as a business model,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So,
which is different than RIA, which is an organization whose existence is to protect IP of other people.
right.
This organization saw a business model of buying and exploiting IP.
Right, right. But I mean, you know, they
schemes
saw
are
this and they're
very
like,
similar.
hey, yeah, it just seems like, you know, this is kind of the seedy side of what Rhea was doing. Granted, you know, if you didn't illegally download the stuff, you wouldn't be in trouble.
Right. And in fairness, the suits themselves, again, were legal and filed, but they basically were trying not to go to court. They were trying to avoid that aspect of it, possibly because they'd have been found out. There was some, I don't remember if it was $3 or $30 million that was handed over as part of this scheme, which all in settlement, which is impressive. But I think the first time it went to court, I think somebody said, no, let's do this. And I think that's when things started to go sideways for him. Because I think they presented the letter in court. And that was where things really went sideways. Because this has been happening for a couple of years. And basically everybody just settled. And then they ended up, somebody's like, no, let's take this to court. I'm ready. But, I mean, people did get in trouble for a little bit for the copyright stuff because they were illegally downloading and sharing content in the end, because the court ended up with the roster of victims. But in general, they just went, well, you were already victims of this. I think that's probably good enough. But it's a fascinating story. I cannot believe that he's either the hubris or the insanity. I don't know which it is. I don't know the guy personally. But it's either hubris or insanity. To say to the court, I know why I'm in prison for 14 years. However, I'd kind of like to do it again. Can I?
I mean, if he doesn't do it through the mail, then I guess he probably.
Yeah, chances are he was going to try and do it all above board this time, but he's prevented from doing so by 3 separate federal laws.
Yeah.
Obviously, the petition was shot down in just a matter of days. The court looked at the thing and went, I know you, get out. And that was the end of it. But it is fascinating that like these idiots keep like bubbling up every once in a while. Like, hey, don't forget, we're still crazy. And then they get shot down, and a couple of years later they'll pop up again. Steele will be out of prison in like 2 years. So who knows what happens? Oh, who knows what happens at that point? I suppose we'll have to wait and see. Hello, YouTube. Thanks for watching, and I hope you enjoyed this episode of F5 Live Refreshing Technology. If you did, please subscribe to the channel down below, and of course hit the notification bell, because we know that subscriptions don't mean much on YouTube anymore. If you've got topics that you'd like us to talk about in the future, please comment them down below. And if you'd like to not follow us on YouTube, there's lots of ways that you can follow along with our content by going to plughitslive.com/subscribe. There you'll see all of our shows and all of the ways that you can watch, listen, and follow along.